Hello, my friends. Mandy here with a quick invitation for you to join the Patreon for our show. We've recently switched up some of the benefits, including a new monthly workbook to go along with all the incredible content you're getting on the show. It's a quote yourself through grief kind of a vibe, and for only $10 a month, it is a wholly worthy and affordable way to invest in your own healing process without the commitment of a full coaching relationship. Learn more at patreon.com/Mandy Capehart, and of course, the link is in the show notes. Thank you as always for being here. Now let's get into the good stuff. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 102, titled, What Do I Really Need to Know? How much time have you spent trying to memorize the 5 stages of grief theory and all its details? Or maybe you've spent hours on the internet trying to learn about all the other historical theories on grief and how they might help you. Whether you are grieving actively for the first time in your life, or you're like me and carried a thread of loss throughout your entire existence, you are never more than 1 degree away from a person who thinks the 5 stages of grief are the formula for healing. So let's spend a few minutes today disassembling the stages and other theories to find out what may actually be true or helpful in these frameworks as we grieve. Before we begin, please do not worry about taking notes. This conversation is available as a transcript on my website, but I want you to understand that I'm only introducing a quick flyover of grief theories to make a point, not create a lecture on the history of grief studies. Internalizing all this info isn't for your benefit, so we're just talking our way through the pathway of grief work as it is today, so you can create a little softer understanding for yourself, and maybe understand the overwhelm of it all a little better too. So take a breath and just listen. We'll start with the most familiar. The 5 stages is Let's start with the most familiar, the 5 stages of grief as identified by well-known psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Those stages she identified are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The idea most people have about these stages is that as we grieve, we are all going to go through these experiences and typically in a linear fashion. But that's where we get it wrong and usually stumble forward in our grief until we finally trip hard enough to ask for help. So the first thing you need to know about these stages is that this is not the first grief theory put forward. Her book on death and dying emerged in 1969 as a result of her working with dying patients. She observed the terminally ill experiencing these, what we'll call basic stages of expression, as they wrestled with their own impending deaths. What this tells us is that the 5 stages of grief are a pathway of understanding for those of us who work with the dying or within the dying process. But for those of us who live on, the framework is deeply lacking. Prior to Kubler-Ross's work, a theory emerged in the 40s from a psychiatrist named Eric Lindemann, who focused on the symptoms of grief and methodology to overcome, including emancipation from your bondage to the deceased, what a phrase, readjusting to your new environment without them, and pursuing the formation of new relationships. Summed up, I think this is where we get that move on mindset that we fight today. And even prior to Lindemann was Freud, good old Freud, who theorized that in order to recover from grief, we must express ourselves and emotionally detach from the deceased. I'm personally grateful that I'm not the only one to believe that all 3 of these are lacking, as evidenced by later grief theories we see from the 80s, 90s, and even through today. But before we get to it, I want to make sure we hit one more person and not skip British psychologist and attachment theorist John Bowlby. Bowlby's work, like Freud and Lindemann before him, really focused on the mental and behavioral impact of grief, and therefore put it down that we could think our way through our pain by addressing our childhood attachments and the way they impact our daily lives now. Bowlby theorized the following as the 4 stages of grief. So here's what he thinks they are: shock and numbness, yearning and searching, disorganization and despair, reorganization and repair. I mean, it sounds good, right? And again, there's nothing inherently negative about this theory. In many ways, having a grid to understand your loss and what you are experiencing can be a comfort and offer guidance of what to look for as you progress in your grief work. I'm not going to spend too much time breaking down the various theories set forth in the 80s, but I do want to emphasize what has changed in the field of psychology because I think it really allows us to question what was given to us as the foundation and take what serves us and leave the rest behind. What we know about grief work is the importance of the individual experience, your story. The theorists of the 19th century and through part of the 20th century, like Freud, approached grief as a disorder, looking for a cure and recovery. Later in the 20th century, you start to see the mind behavior adjustment approach showing up in the work of Bowlby and others, such as Warden's Task of Mourning and Rando's 6-hour processes of mourning. See, I didn't want you to take notes because I don't want you to run off and research all of these thinking, maybe this one will be the one to help. Stay with me. See, grief was largely believed to be just another task to check off. And thanks to Lindemann, who gave us the phrase grief work, even today we can marry ourselves to the idea that this work will give us a satisfying outcome, an idea that there's production eventually coming to a nice close. And we know that's not true. So thankfully, this later wave of psychology and grief work approaches humans from a more collaborative process. You are not a diseased individual, pathologized and beholden to an expert for recovery. You are not a thinking and doing machine in need of a partial adjustment. You are a holistic being with thoughts, feelings, emotions, and connections that are all working in tandem to experience deeply meaningful relationships with others, yourself, and the communities around you. So, what does all of this mean for us? It means we're not wrong to start with the 5 stages of grief because they're a gentle, welcoming, and easier stepping stone toward the more complex, dare I say, more meaningful work that we want to do with ourselves in grief. This matters greatly because anyone who has grieved will tell you that they weren't aware the 5 stages were completely unhelpful when grief really truly knocks at the door. They're the sterilized, socially comfortable way that we address grief. They're hope for a prescription when grief arrives, something we keep on the shelf as predictive in case we start grieving for ourselves. And it's what we see put forward as grief and grief literacy in media. So it makes sense that that's what we would expect when we experience grief for ourselves. It's also not wrong to study earlier theories and begin to understand the foundation of the study of grief work as we approach it today. Although I would strongly encourage anyone that wants to go down that path to do so with eyes wide open, because we've developed further grief theories for a good reason. The last thing I really want you to know about all these theories and stages of grief is this. No theory is going to perfectly describe what you experience in grief. And that's why your story and your grief work is so incredibly important. The way these models of grieving help us is to give us the language around what we might be experiencing and a pathway to follow if we feel a little lost. And if you want to explore more about them, by all means, it really could be a helpful foundation for you to find a new way forward. But personally, I don't revisit these models often, if at all. I honor the work of the past, but I recognize the shortcomings of believing that grief can be pathologized or that we can mind over matter ourselves through loss. It's also helpful for me to remember that my experiences of loss are much wider than death, which is not something easily addressed through these various stages or bereavement models. In short, you are the one that creates the right pathway for yourself by actively participating in your own grief work and healing. When you intentionally grieve, I don't expect that you're simply existing in a state of ongoing sorrow. It means that you are choosing to be present in your grief experience because it's happening to us and around us, whether we like it or not. Our desires to be unaffected by loss will holistically be ignored by the universe. So we have a choice. And while not choosing is always an option, that's a choice in and of itself. I suspect that your time spent listening to this show means you are invested in a happier, healthier outcome. I want to wrap this conversation with a quick visit to positive psychology and the work of Dr. Martin Seligman. If you haven't listened to the interview on this show with Dr. Lucy Hone on resilience and toxic positivity, go back after this and do so. It's episode 85. Seligman's research into the nature of positive psychology and Dr. Hohn's work as a resilience psychologist, they work together, come together with a reminder that what we believe about a thing influences the way that thing impacts our lives. Whether or not we believe we can find healing is true. And I'm not saying the optimist among us will survive loss better than the others, because the skills of resilience are learned skills. Our thoughts can be changed, and the way we approach our grief experience can change too. As we engage our grief experience and our story and learn to navigate the lighter and heavier parts of it with compassionate curiosity, all those theories take the back seat to our true, real, and honest lived experience. The meaningful things we offer ourselves in grief make the mountains climbable, and we find those meaningful things by asking ourselves what we want instead of trying to live out every grief theory from once upon a time. There will be days that inaction and rest are the course of action for our healing, which is just as valid an approach as journaling, talk therapy, movement, somatic embodiment work, or taking a baseball bat to an old piece of office equipment. So the next time your grief knocks, answer the door. You are far more equipped to do this work than you realize. Thank you for listening to episode 102 of Restorative Grief. I understand the hesitation, believe me, to learning more about loss. But you disempower your brilliant mind and discredit your resilient heart when you insulate yourself against grief. Give yourself credit and respect for all the strength and sorrow you've carried at the same time, because both things can be true, and all parts of you deserve compassion. If this is your first time joining me on the show, thank you so much for being here and making space to learn a little more. It's my great joy to have these conversations for you to find your own way forward through loss. You can learn more about my work at mandykpart.com, where you will find links to join the Patreon, become a premium podcast subscriber, or even learn about one-on-one coaching if you're interested in going deeper. Links to my site, my book, and the free private coaching group are all in the show notes. So take a moment to check those out and please leave a review. I love hearing how this work shows up for all of you. Thank you again to each of my patrons of the show. You know it's a great honor to have you in my corner. And as always, one last thing before I go. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.